Hello drafters, here we are on the verge of a brand new set coming out again. Really exciting time to be a limited player, trying to figure out what goes on, and I'm going to take you through some of my thoughts on the matter. I usually do a video on the combat tricks, and that's worked really well in the past, but I thought I'd try a little bit more this time, get a full mechanics video out, and some of the archetypes as well, take you through the whole process, but including some stuff on combat tricks at the end there as well. There's quite a lot to get through, so might as well get straight into it. And the first thing I want to talk about is the mechanics. And the biggest mechanic, the big splashiest mechanic that we're going to be seeing is dungeons. This is Dungeons and Dragons set, and dungeons is going to play a big part of it. So dungeons, there's 3 different dungeons that you have, and whenever a card says venture into dungeon, it could be when a creature attacks, or when a creature enters a battlefield, or when you place a spell, it's part of the spell's effect. You go to the next level of a dungeon. If you're not already in dungeon, you go to the first level, and then each level after that, you go carry on through that dungeon until you complete that dungeon. And I could go a bit more detail on this, but lots of people have produced content telling you how dungeons work. So you probably already know. If you don't, I'll put a link in the description about something that you can look at these things a little bit more. There's also a number of spells that work with the dungeons, and really across all colours. They're clustered a little bit in certain colours, and we'll come on to that a little bit later on. But they are all across colours, so whatever you're playing, you will be doing some venture into dungeon. I think it's a really good way to add value to the set, and it really reminds me of kind of lesson learn and the MDFCs from previous sets and things like that. So I think it's going to be a really good way to play the game. I think it's going to be an interesting mechanic to get our heads around. Another big mechanic that's coming in is dice rolling, and this works pretty much the same way in most of the cards. You'll have a effect on the spell, and the effect changes depending on what you do when you roll a d20. Key thing here, if you're playing in paper, it's got to be a d20 and not a spin down, and I think the pre-release dice are going to be d20s here, so they're a little bit more, the numbers are a little bit more randomly assigned. You don't have the 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15 going around like that. So it's a bit more like a normal d6 where you have the 6 and the 1 on the opposite side. So you will be required to do that if you're doing a sanctioned event. You'll usually get something you get between 1 and 9, and between 10 and 19, and then some of the cards have a special effect that happens when you get a 20, you get that critical roll, and that's kind of how a lot of these cards are set out. You can see a couple here. There's also a particular card, Pixie Guide. In fact, there's another card as well, which will come to a bit later as well, where it allows you to roll 2 dice, and you get to choose the best one. So from the unsets, that's Croc's other thumb. So you have that to work with as well. Another new mechanic that's coming is classes, and there are a number of different classes. There's one monocolor, one for each colour in the uncommon slot, and then there's a number that were rare as well. You can see this one here. This is Paladin class, and it costs a white, so you cast it for a white, and that first effect, that's active straight away. It's an enchantment, and it's a class. It's a little bit like a saga, but you pay for upgrading it as you go through, and if you play it in the Zendikar era, then you'll know about leveling up cards and things like that as well. If in this one, if you pay the 2 and the white, you get that second effect as well as the first effect. So the first effect stays around, and you get the ultimate effect, I suppose, the level 3. And each of these classes do have 3 effects. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. They all seem quite powerful. They all seem to be quite good role players, and some of them fit really nicely in the archetypes that's going on. So these will be really fun to play with as well. The last of the main mechanics is going to be treasure, and again, this is something which is spread over a lot of different colours. It's clustered a little bit in black and red, but you can see here it's in blue and green as well, and there's cards which you have that generate treasure, so you can just use it to ram and things like that, but you will also get extra effects sometimes if you cast a spell using treasure to pay part of its costs, or if you own a treasure, or you can sacrifice an artifact or a treasure or something like that. So it's not just about generating treasure and being able to splash things and ram into things nicely, it's also about these other effects as well. So that's quite a little bit different way to look at treasures, which is going to be quite interesting. Something else that we're going to see a lot of is the modal cards, and these are part of the choose your own adventure part of Dungeons and Dragons, where you can choose one option or choose another, and the outcome of the story or the game will be based on that. I was just trying to capture a little bit of that kind of flexibility that you get in Dungeons and Dragons, and the thing where the players choose the outcomes of the game. And it is worth noting, you can see on these I've got some italicized words, and that's just a little bit of flavour. It's not necessarily a mechanic, it's just a bit of flavour for the card. That's a kind of cool way of doing things, and I think it really fits with the set, so I'm quite happy with that. Sometimes you'll see these italicized words on other creatures and spells and things as well. Like I say, it's just flavour text effectively, but it's really nice to see, and I think it's quite fun. Moving on to the archetypes, and I'm going to go through each archetype in turn and kind of talk about what the theme is and how they're supposed to work. But I'm going to start off talking about the Esper ones together, and these ones are grouped because these are the main archetypes these are the main colour pairs for the dungeon archetype. And you will see eventually in the dungeon other colours as well, but it's predominantly in these three colours. Starting off with the blue-black, all of the uncommon face cards, all of the uncommon signpost cards are legends, by the way, so that's a nice little bit of flavour, and some of the characters of D&D are coming through. So I have Kaidel of Baldur's Gate, and this is really showcasing the blue-black version of the Venture archetype, where it's all about getting in for combat damage, and usually trying to get further through the dungeon with getting through with combat damage. So it could be that you've got an enchantment which allows the creatures to get through, the fly here, it gives them flying, and also allows you to venture in the dungeon. All those other bits and pieces you can do here as well. So you can see there's a real theme, and a really solid theme here about getting combat damage in and progressing through the dungeons by getting combat damage in. The Orzhov colour pair, this is more about completing dungeons, and it's not just about that, but I think a lot of the cards which care about completing a dungeon, as you can see from some of these examples here, are in black-white. So I think that is kind of where it's going for. I looked online and a few places said Reanimator, and there's a little bit of Reanimator going on, but I think it's more about having these complete dungeons. And that leaves blue-white, and to be honest, I couldn't actually find anything particularly going on with blue-white. Obviously, there's a lot of things getting shared between the black-blue and the black-white in this colour pair. You can see from the signpost card here that does care about dungeons. It's going to make those each room trigger twice, so it's not that you're progressing through 2 rooms at once in the dungeon. It means each room triggers twice. So if it's scry 1, you'll scry 1 once, and then you'll scry 1 again. And I think it's a really powerful effect. I think it will really work well with dungeons, but it doesn't really do anything in particular apart from it just does the dungeon thing. So there's not really a huge amount to talk about that, so I'm going to move swiftly on to Rakdos. And Rakdos, the red-black colour pair, that is looking at treasure, and it is, like I said earlier, treasure is across all of the colours, but red and black seem to be where it is centred most. And lots of cards which allow you to generate mana, but like I said, you've got to see some examples here where if you spend treasure to pay for the costs, then it does an additional effect. I think this will be a really good balance between creating treasure and being able to use a treasure. Sometimes you might not want to cast a certain spell until you get a treasure because of the effect that you get, but we've got to see some quite classic examples of effects here which are working with treasures as well, and I think that's a kind of cool way of doing things. Moving on to Gruul, we've got Targ Nar, and the real signpost here is the pack sign. The real mechanic here is the pack mechanic. So this is where it cares if you're attacking with creatures of power 6 or greater, and you can see here some examples of where it's got this mechanic in, and it's looking really strong. I think it's a really interesting one. What I was looking for in the spoilers, and as of recording, there was 251 of the 281 cards spoiled, so there was most of the cards spoiled. And what I was looking for is more things like this, the one in red for a 3/1 here. Cards which have a low cost, but have a high power. So a 3 mana 5/1 or something like that would be really, really good, because it will allow you to get that to that 6 power really quickly. But it doesn't really seem to be much of that going on. There's a couple of cards where you can boost the power, and there's a couple of cards where if once you get this off once, you can get it off again by either creating another creature or powering things up or putting counters on things. But I think there's no real easy way to get to 6 power that you're attacking with. That said, 6 power to attack with in a normal game of limited isn't particularly difficult to get to, so maybe that was done on purpose. Maybe they had something with quite a high power for a low cost in originally and decided to take it out or dial it back at least because it was too powerful. Have to wait and see. I think it does look like a cool mechanic, and I think there's some really good support going on with this one as well. Going to green-white. Green-white is a life gain synergy this time. So you can see you've basically got your Johnny's Pride mate here, but with a little bit of upside. It is in green-white, so it's a 2 mana 2/2, but it's green and white. And when you gain life, put a counter, but you also get a scry 1, so you get a little bit of extra value there, and you get a little bit extra for paying that extra green, so that's really good. We've also got a 3 mana Johnny's Pride mate here as well, so another effect which happens within this colour pair, so there's plenty of ways to get those triggers and get those big creatures as you get in life gain. And you can see a Bard class, not Bard class, but you can see that Cleric class, it allows you, this gains your life, and there's a few different ways to gain life in this colour pair. As you would expect, some cards, incidental life gain here and there, but you can turn that into an advantage with some of these cards which care about your gain life, so that's a pretty good way to have it as well. Next up, we have Izzet, and Izzet this time seems to be all about rolling dice, and I think that does fit quite nicely. It's like a little bit like randomness usually, We've seen a little bit in Prismari, and both is it in Ravnica. I think they would both quite enjoy a little bit of randomness going on in what they were doing. So we've got Barbarian class here, which is the other Croc's other thumb that we saw here, and that allows you to roll more than one dice at a time. So you roll an extra dice and choose the best ones that you get, so it helps your dice rolls get a bit higher than they would be just by themselves. But we've got a couple of the cards that you can see which care about rolling d20s, and you get different effects if you roll d20s, or sometimes you just get an effect when you roll the dice. Like you get here, you get a fairy every time you roll a dice, which is a nice little way to get a bit of guaranteed value out of dice rolling. Moving on to green-black, and the thing this seems to care about is creatures dying, and I think this is going to be a pretty standard green-black deck. You know, it's a green-black mid-range deck, but it's got this little bit of a, not a sacrifice theme, but a thing that cares about things dying, and it doesn't have to be your creatures dying here, it can be the opponent as well, so I think that's a really key thing to think about here. Plenty of ways to remove, lots of removal and things here. You've got spells which are cheaper when you have something die. You can have an effect which happens on the end step if something's died that turn. Loads and loads of different ways, but it's all caring about things dying, and you can see that really well from the headline uncommon here. Moving on to red-white. It's an archetype we've seen a lot of times recently, and it's red-white equipment. Now, I did look at the equipment here, and there wasn't a huge amount of equipment. I think there's only 5 or 6 pieces of equipment when I looked, but there are some really solid examples. And one thing which wasn't really around was creatures that care about being equipped. Apart from the headline uncommon here, there was very few creatures which really cared to be equipped. Like I say, one common and one uncommon so far, but it's all about equipment and all about using the equipment, and really it's probably just an aggro deck with some equipment thrown in, and you get a few bonuses for the equipment, and that's going to be quite nice, but you know, seems pretty standard fare to what we've been used to over the last few sets now. Green-blue, the Simic colours, it's all about ramp, so nothing new there. We've got a really, really powerful uncommon here, I think. It's green and a blue for a 0/4, but you can pay 4, you draw a card, and you can put a land on the battlefield from your hand. And you know, we've seen that effect on a few things before, Uro and things like that, Growth Spiral, and a repeatable way to do this. You know, you can draw cards, and if you draw a land, you can put it on the battlefield straight away, and that can help you do this more in future turns, as well as a body which helps you get to the point in the game where you can really, really benefit from this. I think it's going to be really strong. One thing I really struggled to find was good places to put your mana at first, and until I realise something, I'll come to that in a moment. You have the Owlbear, which is a good card. It's a 5 mana 4/4 draw card, so if you've got a lot of mana, you can cast this, you can draw a card, and cast another spell that you draw off it. So I think that seems a really strong card to have. 5 mana 4/4. There's some big creatures in the format, but there's not a huge amount of big creatures, and a lot of them, the bigger ones, tend to be rares and things like that. So that's something to bear in mind here. But I was really struggling to find good mana sinks until I realised that the classes are really, really good mana sinks, because if you draw them quite late, you can play them and then you can upgrade them twice in the same turn, and that's definitely possible to do. And if you build your deck right, you could potentially even splash a little bit in these colours as well. There's Evolving Wilds in the format, so 3-colour decks are probably going to be seen a fair amount. A few last things to finish off here. We've got some combat tricks. One thing I do like looking at is the 1 mana combat tricks that you can get, because especially when you're on Arena, you can see if on their first turn, if it freezes on a certain point, you can tell they've got one of these tricks here. So it's worth knowing what they had. Lash of Malice is a really good example in the previous set. So you know, if they had a creature out and it flagged up when they're on a single black mana, it showed that they probably had a Lash of Malice in hand, and it was worth knowing about. If it's the single red mana, then it could have been a shock or a lightning strike or a lightning bolt or something like that. So it's a useful little gauge in trying to read a little bit of what's going on in your opponent's hand, and it's really, really useful to know these things. Some other combat tricks that I think are going to be quite important. You've got the green pump spell here, it gives +2/+2 and trample for 2 mana. We've also got Rally Maneuver here. Now I think this is an important one because it can give you a bit of potential of blowout. You can quite easily get a 2/4 if you're attacking it into this, because they can make their creature have bigger toughness, so that creature survives when you weren't expecting it to. But also first strike on another creature, that's going to be quite a shock when it comes through here. It could be used when attacking as well, but I think it's more of a defensive spell. But I think it's a really, really important one here, and one that you're probably going to get blown out by at least once over the format. Last one I want to talk about here is Hunter's Mark, and this is one which if you're particularly playing blue, it's one to really look out for because it'll cost a single green if it's targeting a blue creature, and that is just something which can catch you out. You might not be thinking about a spell which is a single green because it only happens that when it's targeting a blue spell. The final thing I want to talk about is what I think is going to be the boogeyman of the format. And this is just really a bit of fun. But every set, there's you've got your Dream Trawlers or something like that, which is the really scary card that you don't want to see. And this time, I think it's going to be Even Death Draco Lich. And I think this because there's quite a few big creatures. There's a cycle of mythic dragons, and there's other nice big creatures and things like that which are really scary and really powerful, but they can all pretty much die to removal spells, and this one doesn't. The white one kind of doesn't as well, but this one doesn't. It'll die, but then it'll come back, and it'll come back, and it'll come back. And 4 mana, 5 power flyer is absolutely incredible. It's an absolute beating. If it can't remove it, it's just going to kill them quite quickly. If they can't remove it, it's going to come back. And believe me, this will come back. It's got flash, so you can cast it on their turn. And, you know, this is a really, really powerful spell, so this is going to be the boogeyman of the format. And that's the format overview. I hope you've enjoyed what's going on. Let us know in the comments what you think. Is there anything you think I've missed? Is there anything you think I should have added? Anything you think I got wrong? Any cards you think I've mispronounced? Happy to hear it all. You know, this is a bit of an experiment for me. This is a video type that I haven't done before, so really happy to hear your thoughts. If you have liked what you've seen, you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. I'm up to 101 subscribers. I finally got over that 100 mark, but it's still really, really small channel, obviously, and I appreciate every single subscription that I get. Thanks for watching the video. We'll have some gameplay videos coming up very soon, and enjoy your first draft of the format. Always a fun time. Bye.